last known photo of Evan Hale was taken at 3:14 p.m. It wasn't dramatic. No blurred figure in the trees, no shadow behind him. Just a selfie taken at the top of Raven's Spine, an off-map ridgeline that locals at Coldwater Peak pretended not to know existed. In the photo, Evan is smiling, but not the way people usually smile in selfies. His mouth is curved up, sure, but his eyes look distracted, like he's listening to something just out of frame. Behind him, the sky is turning that dull steel gray that always comes before snow. That was the last time anyone saw Evan Hale. Evan was 27, a solid intermediate snowboarder, not reckless, not fearless, just confident enough to believe that the mountain would always behave the way it had before. He worked construction in the summers, lived out of his van during winter, and spent most of his money chasing snowstorms across Western Canada. He wasn't sponsored. He wasn't trying to go viral. He rode because it was the only time his thoughts went quiet. The morning he disappeared, Evan checked in at the Coldwater Peak Lodge just after opening. Lift operators remembered him because he cracked a joke about how the snow felt. Too quiet. That phrase stuck with one of them later. Coldwater had received nearly 3 feet of snow overnight, the kind of powder people dream about. Patrol had marked several areas as high risk for avalanches, but the main runs were open, and conditions were considered safe if you stayed within bounds. Evan didn't. At around 2:30 p.m., witnesses saw him exit a marked trail and traverse toward Raven's Spine, a long, narrow ridgeline that funneled into old-growth forest. It wasn't officially closed, but it wasn't advertised either. If you knew, you knew. And Evan knew. At least, he thought he did. The search began when Evan didn't show up at his van that night. At first, no one panicked. Snowboarders miss check-in times all the time. Phones die, plans change. But by morning, his phone was still going straight to voicemail, and his van hadn't moved. Ski Patrol retraced his past scans and confirmed the last lift he rode. From there, they followed his tracks. That's when things started to feel wrong. Evan's snowboard line was clean and controlled, cutting through powder with purpose. He wasn't lost. He wasn't struggling. He wasn't panicking. Then, about halfway down Raven's Spine, his tracks just stopped. No crash marks, no signs of a fall, no avalanche debris. Just a perfect board line that ended abruptly, as if Evan had simply stepped off the snow. Search and rescue expanded the grid. They brought in dogs. They flew drones when the weather cleared. Nothing. No body. No board. No backpack. No glove. Not even a snapped branch. It was like the mountain had erased him. A week into the search, one of the volunteers, an older man named Curtis, who'd lived near Coldwater his entire life, asked a question no one else wanted to say out loud. Did anyone check the old line? The patrol leader frowned. What old line? Curtis hesitated. The one that used to be there. Decades ago, before Coldwater Peak was a resort, Raven's Spine had been used by logging crews. There was an access route that cut straight down the mountain, steep, narrow, and dangerous. When the resort expanded, they covered it, rerouted trails, and let the forest reclaim it. Officially, it didn't exist anymore, but Curtis said sometimes, after heavy snowfall, the mountain would. Remember, the patrol dismissed it as folklore, but desperation makes people thorough. They searched anyway. 2 days later, they found something. Not Evan, but his board. It was wedged upright between two trees, base facing uphill, bindings empty. No damage, no signs of impact. It hadn't slid there. It had been placed. What made it worse was the direction it was facing. Boards don't naturally stop like that. Standing straight up, pointed back toward where the rider came from. Almost like a warning or a marker. The dogs refused to go near it. Every time handlers tried to guide them forward, the dogs would whine, pull back, and eventually sit down, tails tucked. One handler later said it felt like the forest ahead of them was too full. The official explanation, released months later, was exposure. They said Evan must have fallen into a tree well, been buried by snow, and simply hadn't been found yet. It was neat, rational, final, but it didn't explain the voicemail. 3 weeks after Evan disappeared, his sister received a notification. A new message. The timestamp said it had been sent the day before. The voicemail was only 12 seconds long. At first, all she could hear was wind, low and constant, like breath through a tunnel. Then Evan's voice. Not panicked, not yelling, just tired. He said, "I think I took the wrong line." There was a pause, like he was listening. Then he added, "It keeps flattening out, but I'm still going down." A sound followed, not a scream, not static. Something closer to a deep, distant shifting, like snow settling, or trees moving when there's no wind. The message cut off. Phone records showed Evan's phone had briefly reconnected to a tower, one that hadn't existed at the time he disappeared. It had been installed 2 years later. After that, people started coming forward. A lift operator remembered Evan asking a strange question earlier that day. "Does this mountain ever loop?" he'd asked. The operator laughed, assuming he meant runs connecting back to each other. But Evan hadn't smiled. A snowboarder who rode Raven's spine the week before Evan vanished said he'd felt something strange near the same section. He said the slope felt longer than it should have been, like it was stretching. Another rider claimed he heard someone behind him, someone carving perfectly in sync, only to turn around and see no one there. Locals started sharing stories they'd kept quiet for years, about riders who swore they'd been riding for hours, only to pop out of the trees minutes from the lodge. About tracks that followed theirs too closely. About lines that didn't exist on any map. The most disturbing detail came from Curtis. He said the old loggers used to have a rule. If you ever felt the mountain even out beneath your feet, if a steep descent suddenly became smooth and endless, you were supposed to stop immediately, sit down, take your board off, because if you kept riding, the mountain would assume you meant to stay. Evan's final photo was re-examined after that, zoomed in, enhanced. Behind him, just beyond the ridgeline, there was something subtle in the snow. Not a shadow, a curve, a slope that shouldn't have been there. Too smooth, too continuous, a line that didn't end. Every winter since, someone leaves a board at the top of Raven's spine. Bindings empty, base facing uphill. No one admits to doing it. Ski Patrol removes it every season. And every season, it comes back. Some nights, after heavy snowfall, lift operators swear they see a single set of fresh tracks cutting cleanly down the mountain, long after the last run. Perfect edges. No wobble, no hesitation. Just a rider who never stops. And if you're ever snowboarding and feel the slope beneath you grow unnaturally calm, no chatter, no resistance, no end in sight, do not chase it, because some lines aren't meant to be finished, and some riders don't go missing. They just keep going.